tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal that's hit him on the pad. He's out. Lions gone. New South Wales are 9 down. Onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car. Oh, I think it's hit a car. What a way to bring up your 50.
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Hello everybody, Manners here, coming to you after a rain-soaked day at the Gabba. That's right, most of play on the first day of the third test was washed out. Australia faced 13.2 overs after being sent into bat by Rohit Sharma. They were none for 28. Usman Khawaja was 19 off 47 deliveries, and Nathan McSweeney 4 off 33 deliveries. We'll get into some of the more of the talking points I want to dive into for this wrap, but I think honours are even after day one, maybe slight advantage to India after the play today. I mean, if you take into account that India hold the Border Gavaskar trophy, this day plus the fact that the forecast is bad for the rest of this test match just plays into the Indian hands. I mean, they'll only need to win one more of the next 2 test matches if this one's a draw to retain the trophy. And it wouldn't be impossible, but it would be tough for Australia if they don't get a lot of play in this test. Then they would have to, they'd have to win one of the next 2 and try and get a draw or win both of the next 2. So this rain is actually probably better for India than it is for Australia. Australia need to get ahead of this series so they can, regain the trophy that they haven't held since 2017. So honours even, I would say, after day one. And the forecast for day 2 isn't as bad, but then days 3, 4, and 5 are pretty bad at the Gabba. We could see lots and lots of rain. So normally it's the Sydney test that is rained out, and that is something else for the Australians to consider. I mean, there is a lot of rain around in Sydney. They don't want to be heading to the SCG in the last test looking for a result. So, yeah, it's getting crunch time for the Aussies pretty quickly, and the rain today certainly didn't help them. So let's talk about the 2 teams. We spoke about the Australian team in the preview, but they've brought in Josh Hazlewood for Scott Boland. And actually, before play, Hazlewood was on SEN, and he was talking about, possibly playing test matches with Scotty Boland. He said he played one with Scotty back in England in 2023. But because and this is for Hazlewood's word, he said, the other 2, you've got the left armer in Mitchell Starc, and then you've got the skipper in Pat Cummins. So there's not a lot of room there for Boland and Hazlewood to ever play together. And this is why it's so frustrating having a fast bowling skipper like Pat Cummins, because ideally you'd actually probably want to rotate Boland, Hazlewood, and Cummins around. You probably want Starc to play as much as he can because he cleans up the tail, he provides the left arm variety, and he scuffs up the footmarks for Nathan Lyon. But, you could see an ideal situation where Cummins, Hazlewood, and Boland all rotate around a bit, keeping them fresh. But because Cummins is the skipper, he's not going to rotate. So it means then you're asking Hazlewood to rotate just for Boland, and that's not really fair either. So this is the pickle that Australian cricket have got itself in by forging on with Pat Cummins' captaincy. I guess my annoyance is I just don't see the benefit of that in terms of I don't think Cummins is particularly great tactically that you're willing to make that sacrifice. But anyway, Hazlewood said it. He said he's probably not going to play with Boland because the other 2 are the skipper and the left armer. So, for all those Scotty Boland fans out there, Pat Cummins is standing in the way of your man getting a bit more of a go. So it doesn't look like that's going to change in the immediate future unless Cummins stands down. But anyway, so Hazlewood's in for this test match. We didn't see him bowl yet. And then for India, they made some changes that were predicted on the preview show. I think Gav predicted Ravindra Jadeja to come in for Ravichandran Ashwin, and that did happen. And that does a couple of things. Firstly, I think it strengthens the batting. Gav made a very good point that Jadeja has a very good record away from home with the bat in hand. So to have him down the order does strengthen the lower order. And I think on the last tour here, Jadeja averaged around 40. So he brings confidence to playing in Australia. So Jadeja for Ashwin, good change. I'd like to see them play together in this tour. I think Australia's middle order is still vulnerable to good spin, but I guess in the conditions that are looking quite wet and green in the Gabba, having extra seam strength is the way to go. So Ashwin sits out again, Jadeja comes in, and Akash Deep replaced Harshit Rana. We didn't see much of Deep, but I think that was a sensible change. Rana looked to struggle a bit in the Adelaide Test match, so maybe bring him out, giving him a bit of a rest because they were back-to-back Test matches, and then they can assess how he's looking heading into the MCG or SCG Tests. Rana did look good in the first Test in Perth, so I don't think they should completely put a line through him, but we'll see how Akash Deep goes. If he can stand the ball up and hit the seam on this greenish wicket, then he could be really good for India. So then Rohit Sharma won the toss and he elected to bowl. A sensible decision, I think. Looking at the overhead conditions, it was humid, it was cloudy. Both top orders have struggled in this Test series. India have been bowled out for 150 and 180, and Australia's top order has looked vulnerable. So it's not the worst thing to do to bowl first. I saw a headline in the Daily Telegraph likening it to NASA's decision all those years ago where Australia were, I think, four down for about 370 at the end of when NASA sent Australia in. But they didn't get as much play today, but we'll see how Rohit Sharma's decision plays out. This Test match is going to be a little bit different. And in fact, batting second in a rain-shortened game can give you a better chance at a result because you can therefore just bat once. So it actually was a good decision, I think, from Sharma. Normally, the Gabba wicket can be a little bit slower on the first day, then sort of flattens out, and its best batting conditions can be on the second or third day. But with all this rain around, it's hard to predict how this wicket's going to go. It'll probably stay seamer friendly. I mean, it wasn't doing a lot in that 13.2 overs, but it was doing enough. Don't think India hit the right lines and lengths consistently enough, but it was difficult conditions. There was a lot of moisture around. So, and probably not a bad toss for Australia to lose. If they can get through the new ball, maybe then they can put a big first innings score and they can boss the game, as the youngsters like to say. But yeah, so Australia, none for 28 off the 13.2 overs they faced. There was one interruption there. They went off for a little while and came back out. So hard for anyone to get going then. Hard for the bowlers to get going, hard for the batters to get going. So it's hard to really glean much from that short bit we did see. But again, I think a little bit of what we saw in that Adelaide first evening, the Indian bowlers weren't quite full enough and straight enough and making the Aussie batters play. But as a very small sample size, and they will take a little while to acclimatise. Usman Khawaja looked good. He made 19 off 47. He was beaten a couple of times, but he just plays straight down the line. So if the ball moves across him, it looks like he's beaten, whereas I think he played pretty well. That's the best Khawaja's looked, I think, this series so far. Played a couple of nice shots. McSweeney, 4 off 33. He'll be very glad he got through this little tricky period. So Australia, go into the second day, none for 28, having been sent in. Play will start half an hour early on day 2. So they're going to try and get 98 overs in a day. Good luck getting 98 overs in with the way these two teams bowl. I mean, they'll be in a lengthened day, I reckon they'll be lucky to get 85 overs in. I mean, that's the state of play at the moment. No one gives a shit about over rates. And I think, in a way, maybe it's time to give up on this notion of 90 overs a day. Maybe we need to lessen it. Now that they have TV reviews, concussion tests, all this stuff, maybe they should just knock it down to like 85 a day. So it's a more achievable aim. But anyway, another thing for another day. So really not much else to talk about. I mean, it was such a short day, 13.2 overs. One thing I wanted to discuss was the discussion around 4-day test matches. So we're getting a great example already of why it is a fucking stupid line of discussion. I'm sick of all these idiots all week talking about 4-day tests. Do they not know the way international cricket works? 4-day tests are permitted. They are permitted. You can schedule a 4-day test. So why do they need to mandate that all tests should be 4 days? I think 4-day tests are very appropriate, and I would be very happy if Australia, say, had Ireland out here for a tour and they decided just to play 2 4-day tests over 2 weeks, because as has been discussed, if you play 4 days, you can go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, rest Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then play the next test. I think they're all meritorious ideas, but you can already do that. So all these idiots who keep bringing it up, but like it's a new thing. It's not a new thing. You can play 4-day tests. And I still stick to my theory. You don't want 4-day tests for the big series. You think about the Ashes, the Border Gavaskar Trophy, all these iconic series should be played over 5 days, because there's more, you need time for a result. Not all tests end in 3 or 4 days. Not all tests are played in the same conditions. We're seeing here the rain on the first day of the Gabba still leaves plenty of time to get a result. So I'm all for 4-day tests for certain situations, but it doesn't need to be mandated. I think each nation should be allowed to decide what they want to do for each series. And if some want to play some 4-day test series, go for it. But I would be appalled if the Ashes, the Border Gavaskar Trophy, some of these bigger series were reduced to 4 days. I think it would be a terrible decision. And I don't think it needs to be done. I don't think it would free up much time in the calendar. I think you would frustrate fans, because you would get situations like this where you lose a day. And then, as someone who's commentated on a lot of 4-day cricket at Sheffield Shield level, when you lose time, it really eats into a 4-day contest. That's the thing. If you get the full 4 days in, it's not so bad. But as soon as you lose half a day or whatever it is, it's really hard to get a result in 3.5 days or 3 days. So frustrating during the week listening to all these Muppets on other stations talking about should they have 4-day tests. They already have 4-day tests. And if other nations want to play them, they should do it. If it means they can play more tests, do it. But it doesn't need to be mandated, you Muppets. And another couple of talking points I want to talk about just before I wrap this up is there is a bit of discussion around the Gabba's fading, the Gabba fading as a venue, and now it's the last test venue in Australia. And I don't want to get into the politics of Queensland. I'm not a politics guy, but I do think that Queensland is a proud sporting state, and they should have an appropriate stadium for that. Now, I know there are hospitals that need to be built. There are schools that need to be built. There are lots of infrastructure things that need to be done in Queensland. But I do think having a proper stadium to host marquee cricket events, a replacement for the Gabba is needed. And I think, when I look at Queensland, it's such a sporting state. When you go there, everyone's out and about, very active. It is like on the stereotypical Aussies. They love it. They love their sport. So I think it would be appropriate if they had a new cricket stadium that was befitting such a great sporting state. And we're seeing the Gabba here. It's fine, but you just sort of look at it compared to the other stadiums in Australia, and it doesn't compare anymore. And Cricket Australia, Nick Hockley was it was reported during the week they're pushing pretty hard for it. And I've heard Nick talk about this in the past, that the Olympics are the time to do this stuff. If you're ever going to do it for the Olympics. And I just hope this gets over the line, because I think after next season, Queensland might never have another test match again if they don't build a new stadium. Nothing is scheduled after next summer at the Ashes. So it will be a shame if there's not another test match in Queensland ever again. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is Marnus Labuschagne has hit back at David Warner in the Daily Telegraph. Well, David Warner was saying on Fox Sports, it was reported in the Telegraph, that he didn't feel Marnus was out of his form slump yet and he needed to see more. And Marnus and Warner referred to Marnus getting out in the gully, and he's done that before. And Marnus said, and I've looked back and I think I can only remember getting caught at gully twice. So I might have to have a look at Bull's comments there. But like I said, everyone's here to write newspapers and write articles. Also, David Warner said something about Glenn Maxwell not deserving a test spot on the Sri Lankan tour because he hasn't played any Sheffield Shield cricket. And friend of the show, Jeff Lemon, then tweeted out that David Warner only played 22 Sheffield Shield matches in his whole career. So David Warner has settled into the media very, very quickly. Normally there's a sort of a bit of a period in between where a player comes out from playing, and for the first couple of years, they're quite measured in what they say because, you know, most of the team they're commentating on are their mates. They don't want to offend them. But Warner has none of those fears at all. And yeah, it's funny because, you know, I was talking about in the last test, it's sort of, you know, war between the media and the Australian team at the moment, which erupted after the first test. But I think it's been simmering a while. That, you know, David Warner, who literally just retired, would be now at the front of this for Fox Cricket. So I can't imagine Warner will be invited into the change room for a beer anytime soon after those comments. I respect Warner actually saying what he thinks. I think that's what you need in media. So I think he's doing the right thing. You should always be talking to your audience and not worrying about who your mates are and if they get offended. But the byproduct of that is sometimes people do get offended, as I've learnt in the past. So anyway, Warner slipped into it straight away. We'll see what happens there throughout the rest of the series. But look, that's it for my day one wrap. I can't believe I got through 20 minutes of talking about a day that was 13.2 overs only. So Australia, after being sent in none for 28 off 13.2 overs, I have a lot of special guests joining me for the wraps for the rest of the test match. I've got Chandresh from India, who came into the studio over the winter, so he'll be wrapping day two with me. And I've got some other regular panelists booked for the rest of the test match. So stay tuned for those. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I'll be back at the end of day two.